principle of criminal law in every civilized society has this in common. Any person who sways another to commit murder, any person who furnishes the lethal weapon for the purpose of the crime, any person who is an accessory to the crime is guilty. There are those in our own country, too, who today speak of the protection of country, of survival. A decision must be made in the life of every nation at the very moment when the grasp of the enemy is at its throat. Then it seems that the only way to survive is to use the means of the enemy, to rest survival upon what is expedient, to look the other way. Well, the answer to that is survival as what? A country isn't a rock. It's not an extension of oneself. It's what it stands for. It's what it stands for when standing for something is the most difficult. Before the people of the world, let it now be noted that here in our decision, this is what we stand for: justice, truth, and the value of a single human being.
Abby Mann picked out that segment for us to show at whatever time we deemed appropriate, with an idea that that segment of Maximilian Schell's closing argument, Spencer Tracy's reaction to it, is a piece of that movie which speaks to us today. That's Abby Mann's perspective. Does that speak to you in the same way that it speaks to Abby Mann?
You know, I think when Abby wrote the screenplay, we were going through the McCarthy era. And clearly that was a time period where the United States was slowly adopting some of the very tactics of the Nazi regime, and our civil rights were being eroded. And after we emerged from that era, we now find ourselves in this new period of the war on terror. And there are those who have argued that in this war, the law must be silent. There are things going on in our own country today where people are making the argument, the very argument that Spencer Tracy warned against, saying that it is necessary for the protection and survival of our country to put our principles aside. It is necessary for us, for example, to detain people without giving them trials, without giving them rights to have any kind of lawyer, and to put them in detention forever, as long as this war goes on. It's appropriate, some argue, for the government to eavesdrop on every American without permission, without a warrant from a court, because that's necessary in order to maybe protect us from terrorism. And it is necessary for the United States to kidnap people and put them in black sites around the world, and to even use acts of heinous torture, which normally would violate the most important treaties of our country that it is a party to, because it's necessary. And I think when Spencer Tracy says a country is more than a rock, it's more than an extension of oneself, it's what it stands for. It's what it stands for when standing for something is the most difficult. That is the lesson of our time. While we're fighting this war on terrorism, we have to remember that we lose the war not by combating the terrorists, but we lose it if we give up all of our civil liberties, the very liberties that make us special as a country. And I do think that we are in a very precarious place right now as a country.
You are one of the foremost authorities on international criminal law. You're also one of the foremost authorities on Star Trek. Connect the two for me.
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure I'm a foremost authority on Star Trek, but when I was writing my first when I was writing my first major book about the Yugoslavia atrocities, and I finally finished it, it's like a 3,000-page book with 4,000 footnotes. I was exhausted from the seriousness of the endeavor and just all the work. And so I went on like a late night binge watching the reruns of Star Trek The Next Generation. And maybe it was because I'd been working on these issues, but every episode I kept seeing international law. and then I realized, no, actually, the construct that Gene Roddenberry had created for this television series made it the only TV series that was all about international law, although they called it interstellar law. There were treaties between different planets, there was extradition law, there was genocide, there was the Prime Directive, which is just like the United Nations Charter that says you're not supposed to interfere in the domestic affairs of another country. So I decided just for fun I'd write a law review article where I would tell people that they could teach international law using examples from Star Trek. And also people would find it fun. So I published that. It became a little cause celeb, you know, a lot of media attention. And then ultimately a book came out about law and Star Trek. And a lot of other people have been writing about law as it relates to Star Trek, but only I had written about international law. And so the first chapter of that book is, you know, the Interstellar Relations of the Federation by Michael Scharf. Anyway.
Well, I suppose to complete the full circle of what we started out today, watching a vignette of Judgment at Nuremberg, one of the actors in that movie was William Shatner.
Oh, that's where you're going. Yes,
well,
that's
where I was going. I just thought about
that's
that.
That's right. Yes, Captain Kirk got his start, his big Hollywood break in Judgment at Nuremberg. He's that really, really good-looking bailiff to Judge Hayward. But ultimately, you know, when you compare what he looks like now in what's his new show, Boston Law. Yeah, it's kind of sad. But anyway, no, he was quite the actor, and he's made a career itself on Star Trek, and you know, he does lectures not just at Star Trek conventions, but you know, more serious about the lessons of Star Trek to our daily lives. So you know, it's funny that a cultural phenomenon like that can become important. But I will, just to make this serious, there are other law professors that write about, for example, you know, taking Shakespeare and using that as a way to teach international law. And I say, well, you know, if you can use Shakespeare's Henry V, why not use Captain Kirk? Certainly the students in the classroom know Kirk a lot better than they know Henry V. So.
This has been terrific.